Hello, friends. This is Pam Montgomery, and I am here today for your special bonus material this month with Kate Gilday, one of my oldest, dearest friends from many, many, many years ago. Kate is an amazing herbal practitioner and flower essence practitioner and Ayurvedic life coach, and she's so talented and so amazing, has been a teacher for, oh gosh, let's see, decades, many, many, many years, has operated Woodland Essence is the name of her company for 30 plus years now, up in the Adirondacks now, and doing all kinds of amazing, good, beautiful products for people with Lyme disease, especially, and chronic disease, and now with all the virus action we got going. She's helping folks with that. So she's just this an amazing healing woman. Not to mention she's one of the best singers you've ever heard sing a song. So she's a grandma. She's like, the list is just goes on and on. So anyway, I'm so glad that Kate's here with us, and she's going to share with you some of her experiences with flower essences, and who knows what she'll come up with today. So Kate, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your willingness to talk with the lovely folks who are doing this course.
Thanks, Pam. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very excited actually that Pam has asked me to be a part of this particular course that she's presenting. And for those of you who are taking the course that Pam has presented on plant spirit healing and all that she does, it's kind of ditto both ways. We started years ago as what we used to call each other was herbal sisters, and of course our paths have crisscrossed and been together and woven together in so many different ways. And the plants, of course, are right behind everything. So I thought I'd share today a little bit of how I began with my flower essence journey. Thinking that some of you may already be very well versed in flower essences and working with them, but some of you may just be beginning. And I was hearkening back to my early days of working with flower essences and sort of the progression and the ease that developed over time. So I'm just going to sort of talk and share about that. And then what I wanted to do is also talk a little bit about how you can feel more comfortable sitting with the plant and believing that what you're hearing, feeling, sensing, seeing is really true. So I'll just start at the beginning. So in 1980, I had my first session with a Bach flower practitioner who was also a friend and neighbor. And I was myself going through a challenging time and went to see her, and she prepared a flower essence for me after we sat and spoke for a while, addressing the issues that were up for me at the time. And I had been tuned into plants before that for almost, about more than that, maybe about, so that was 1980. So probably about 7 years before that, I began my herbal journey. So it was kind of part of that journey that occurred. And so I was already kind of a little bit tuned in with plants and the fact that they were more than the form that they were, kind of felt the energetics of that time of the plants and didn't really have a name for that, but really felt that and recognized that. So when Elaine gave me this lovely flower essence formula and I began taking it, I felt a shift, which took not so long, maybe a week or two. I felt a real shift in how I was thinking about things, how I was feeling about things. And I was very impressed, not surprised, but very impressed with the level of that feeling, which went pretty deeply and pretty broadly as well. So I asked her more questions about it, began studying a little bit with her, read what I could. There wasn't a lot out there at that time, back in 1980, but enough so that I definitely read about Dr. Bach and all of the essences they were making. So I bought some Bach essences and began using them with my family and my community. The community already knew me as an herbalist, and I began weaving flower essences into the practice that I had, which was really helpful. At the time, I thought of flower essences as being addressing the emotional, spiritual aspect of someone's discomfort or situation. And I use them in conjunction with the herbs as well. So it was very helpful. And I remember, I'm just moved to tell you this one story. So I worked with people of all ages. I worked with families, I worked with children, I worked with just my community at large. I remember one day a mother asked if I could help her child who was having nightmares. And I thought, sure, let's get out the books and see what we can do. So at the time, similar to the way some people think about, okay, I have this condition, I'm not using a drug, but can I use a herb? That's kind of where I started. So I was thinking, okay, nightmares, where do we go for that? But it's interesting that by the time I was doing this, I was also connecting up with FES, Flower Essence Society, out in California. So I began using their essences as well. And sure enough, one of the essences in particular was St. John's wort, which helped to heal disturbances in the etheric body. And I was honestly just learning about what the etheric body was. So this is all kind of like, allow yourself to not know, allow yourself to have a beginner's mind as you go forward, because you will learn more that way. And I felt like I was very humbled by the learning that the flower essences offered. Anyway, I can't tell you exactly what else was in that formula, but I remember that St. John's wort flower essence was. And we gave him that essence, and within just a few days, I got a call from the mother saying, I don't know what was in that magic potion of yours, but my son is doing so much better. And I said, well, give it some time, see how it goes. So we scheduled another meeting for 1 month, 4 weeks. And at that meeting, the little boy who was about 9 years old said, so how does this work exactly? And I thought, wow, good question. How do I tell a 9-year-old how this works? So what I said was, and at the time I was using a pendulum, and he wanted to know what that was as well. He wanted to know how that worked. So I said, well, basically, if you think about it, the pendulum can answer yes or no questions. So when I ask a question, the pendulum goes back and forth. He says, but who's moving that pendulum? So I thought about it. Now, I was raised with guardian angels. So it was not a big leap for me to be able to share the idea to him that I thought that everybody had a guardian angel, someone that really helped them. He thought that was a great idea, thought that was pretty cool. I said, so basically, when we're using this pendulum, your guardian angel is talking to my guardian angel, and they're coming up with something good for you. And he was like, oh, it's kind of like a telephone. It's like, yes, it's kind of like a telephone. And as simplistic as that is, and I know I'm jumping the gun by talking about preparing a flower essence for someone before I go back to the beginning of the essences, I just want to say that that's kind of how it feels for me. We kind of have this communication that happens. You can think of it as angels, you can think of it as a telephone, but it's that communication back and forth that we have with all of nature, with all of life. That I know that you've heard that from Pam before. This is just another voice sharing that same information. That the life force, the vitalism, the intelligence of nature, we are part of that intelligence. And it's learning how to tune into that actual intelligence where all can be revealed, as well as us revering that intelligence as well in any life form at all. So going back to when I was actually beginning to work with the flower essences, after reading about Bach, after seeing that FES essences were being created, about that same time that I learned about FES, I had this question about the flower essences that Bach was making. Some were trees, some were shrubs, some were plants, and I thought, these essences are awesome, but they're all coming from the UK, from Scotland and England. And I thought, what about the resonance that we have with plants, trees that are local to us here in the Northeast of the United States? And that was kind of rolling around in my mind. At the same time, I was deepening my relationship with the woodlands, the forest here in the Northeast. And my husband, Don, who was definitely very tuned into the forest from the time he was basically a baby. I was learning a lot from him, and we were journeying into the forest together. Well, around that same time that everything was going on, Dawn and I had a shared dream one night, which is honestly the first and only sharing dream that I've had with my partner. And that we've been together for 42 years now. So, but this one dream was very clear. And I woke in the morning and I turned to him. I said, I had this amazing dream last night. And he turned to me and he said, did it have to do with us going out into the forest and making essences of the trees? And that was exactly the dream that I had had. And in the dream, at the time, I didn't play a flute. I mean, I sang, but I didn't really play an instrument per se. In the dream that I had, I was also playing the flute to the trees in the forest. So that was not in his dream, but his dream was more about finding the trees and accompanying me into the forest for flower essence making. So that was probably 1988 or 9. And we began going into the forest together. That summer, we spent the next 2 years and we made many, many essences. We felt like bees going to these beautiful flowers that were all in the woodlands and on the edges of the woodlands. And some of the flowers that were up in the taller trees, we called our son in. He was very young. He was only like 5 years old, but he was a little monkey. So he would shimmy up the trees, and he was very handy with clippers, and he would clip and carry the branches down of the flowers, and we'd make the flower essence at the base of the tree. So it was a family affair, and we just, the more, how can I put this? The more time we spent in the woods with this idea of gathering, not plant parts necessarily, but just the flowers and placing them in the water, leaving them in the sun, sitting with the trees beforehand or afterwards. It was probably two of the most joyous years of my life, honestly. We felt very tuned in. The interesting thing was that sometimes we didn't sit with the tree or the shrub or the plant beforehand. We would do that afterwards. But I think we made like 80 essences over 2 years. And then things kind of calmed down. You know how sometimes you have a project and you just kind of like, woof, and then you're so in it. And then there's this moment where it's just like, not really a total closure, but kind of like, okay, capping it off for now. We looked at the essences and we realized that the trees, shrubs, flowers that we really felt spoke to us and shared freely of what their contribution was were the trees and shrubs and flowers that we already had relationship with, which I thought that was very telling. And so we had already developed a relationship with these plants ahead of time, sitting with them, dancing with them, greeting them, meeting them, singing with them, et cetera, for a time. There were a number of trees that we made flower essences from that when I sat to ask what it was that they had to share, I kind of chuckle now. It was more like they're like, oh, no. You have to come back. You have to come back again and again. And once we're ready to share with you, we will share. So once again, a very humbling experience. There honestly are a few essences that we made way back when that I still have not garnered the actual, what we would call description of them. So this is a lifelong study and a lifelong experience and a lifelong relationship with the forest. And most of our essences are from the native plants. I think they're all native trees, shrubs, and flowers from the Northeast. So that was then, and this is now, and we've traveled. We've made Irish essences from Ireland, and we've made essences of the wetland plants out here in the Adirondacks, and we've made essences from the Adirondack orchids. And some of these, again, don't have descriptions yet. It's really a labor it's interesting. I'm going to call it a labor, but I'll think of labor as being not work necessarily, but where you put your intention, your attention, and your time and your effort. And of course, life gets busy with many other things. So I'm not in a hurry still. Whatever essences want to be shared with the world will be. So as you're making your own essences and as you're sitting with your plants that you would like to make an essence of, I'd like to suggest a few things. And the first is that you attune yourself in the ways that Pam has shared with you. In a way, plant spirit healing and flower essences, they are different for sure, but they also, I think, the vibration that you get from plant spirit and healing comes from your relationship that you've developed with each plant that you're working with and have brought that essence, that familiarity, that relationship deeply into you so that you can call it at any time. Flower essences are more, they have a form, they're in a bottle. I should never assume anything, but I believe that Pam has shared with you how you make flower essences. I'm going to leave that to her. But once you've made your essence and it's in a bottle, it's with you, it has kind of a physical sense to it, even though it is more of a energetic aspect. It's still in water and brandy, so it's a little different. What I have found has happened over years is that, and this is 30 years later, honestly, it's not that I can always tune into what a person wants. I still use my pendulum, and I have kind of a team around me that I call in to help me when I'm working with someone to create an essence. But when I'm creating an essence formula, when I'm actually sitting with the plant to make a flower essence of it, I make an offering. That offering can be anything that is important to you or that feels right. I mostly use shells that I get from the ocean because most of my work is done away from the ocean, and I feel like it's a special gift because it's of the same Northeast area, but it is from someplace where these plants can't be. So it's kind of a special gift. Some people use tobacco, some people use cornmeal, some people use a song, which sometimes I use. Others take a piece of their hair, but some offering of some kind. And it can just be words. It can just be a prayer. It can be whatever your intention is. It's just reaching out to make a connection. And if you think about relationship as something that gets created and begun and then can develop and deepen over time with a person, and the same thing can happen with a plant and plant spirit and the essence that you are in touch with. So after making an offering of some sort, I sit for a while and then ask the plant 2 questions. First, I ask, is there something that I can do for you? And it's been amazing to think about some of the sort of answers that I think about, whether I feel like it's coming directly from my brain or from my imagination, my heart, wherever. It's anything from, that plant over there is really shading me. Could you either move that plant, or can you cut a limb of the tree, or something like that? Or I could really use some water, or there's many other kinds of things that have been asked that I can't think of right offhand, but some of them are not just practical for the plant, but sometimes bigger work, asking me if I could, learn more about the plant, if I could bring someone else to the plant, if I would come back for a number of days in a row and play my flute. When I was 50, which was 2001, I gifted myself with a woodland flute that I now use pretty much every day that's not too cold, with nature or with a particular tree or plant. So I don't want to get too off the subject here. So coming back to sitting with the plant itself, making a promise to actually do something and then making sure that I do it. That's important, as you well know. And then the second question that I ask is, is there something that you want to share with me that you'd like to share with just me personally, or if you'd like it to share it with me and have it then go out into the world? And so then that is something else that also happens, which has been, again, something that changes and is something that happens in its own way with each plant, which is really a beautiful thing. Hold on for a second. Hi, I'm doing a Zoom with flower essences. So my other partner in flower essences, Don, has just come home from work, so I'm just saying hello to him. Okay, so after I do those two things, then what I do is then I make the flower essence itself. And after I make the essence, place the flowers in the water. I actually put my hands around the bowl and I sit in a little bit of a meditation mode, although not doing anything besides just being present. And after the flower essence is completed, I step away, I come back in 3 hours and take the flowers off of the water and make the essence itself. Then what I do, if I haven't done it beforehand, is I want to establish more of a relationship of understanding and paying attention. So I will look around and see, are there many of these flowers? Are there just a few of these flowers? Is this flower singular? Sometimes in the forest, what we find is plants that are quite shy and they're not in abundance. If you go into a field, say right now, the one flower that's passing on right now is goldenrod, and there are fields that are just filled with goldenrod. Or in the September, there are fields of sunflowers, whereas in the woodlands, sometimes we have maybe 1 or 2 lady slippers at a time, or just a few blue cohosh or black cohosh, or spikenard, which is another woodland plant, maybe in a small group or just one here and there. So you see how the community that your flower is in terms of how many of itself is out there. And similar to the flower essences that we have, to the herbs that we have, if there is multiple herbs in terms of large collections of like any of those herbs I was talking about, goldenrod, or maybe mugwort, sunflowers, sometimes those will have a different feeling than the plants that are in the woodlands themselves that are very more isolated and quiet and shy. So just kind of pay attention to that. Then I believe the next thing that I pay attention to is the environment it's in terms of what other plants are around. What other plants are they hanging out with? That also gives you some ideas of what that plant might be sort of showing you about itself. Also, the form of the plant itself. Is it a star-like plant? Is it a tubular plant? Is it hang down? Does it come up straight and tall? There's many forms that a plant can have. Are there spikes? Are there thorns? Are there places that are pierced in the leaf itself or in the flower petals? What are you noticing? And it takes a lot of time and effort to kind of really pay attention. I'm sure Pam has used, and I also use, a little magnifier to get really close to the plant. And then that's like going into a whole nother world about what's really happening with the flower, because a lot is revealed in terms of color and form and what's happening at the edges of the petals, or what's happening in the very center, what's going on with the actual pistils and stamens. So these will also give you information. So you look at the color of, and so again, I think Pam has gone over some of those things with you. And it's really about paying attention. And the more you pay attention, the deeper you go, the more you're going to have that's going to be shared with you. So I'd like to share a few things about that I have used over time. So just like I was talking about earlier about using St. John's wort for when there are breaks or openings or something happening in the actual etheric realm, and St. John's wort being used for that. If you look at the flower petals of St. John's wort, they look like there's these little dots of color, and they almost look like they are actually filled with like a red or a purple dye. And it looks almost like there's like holes in that. And so it kind of refers to that holes in the etheric realm, and the St. John's wort being able to kind of help with healing that. I think about motherwort. Motherwort is one of the plants that I use often for people who have a problem with boundaries, creating their own personal boundaries, or having problem with respecting boundaries of other people. And motherwort has those beautiful flowers, but she also has these very sharp points. When you go to touch motherwort in the latter part of her growth, you can get really, sharp pinpricks. So it's like looking at that, looking at those boundaries and creating boundaries. Another plant that I love to use that has pricks on it, but also beauty, is hawthorn. So if hawthorn, we think of as one of the plants, one of the trees for the heart. And hawthorn has both this beautiful flower in the springtime, and it also has these intense sharp thorns. So in looking at that, it's like helps to heal those places in our heart that have been wounded. And that's what I like to think about in terms of hawthorn. So just trying to give you some ideas of like how you can look at not just at the actual form, but also then the gesture of the plant. So I'd like to talk about black cohosh for a minute. So when black cohosh comes and rises in the woods, it starts off as almost very much like a fern, where a fern is curled up, and then it opens in this beautiful way, and then these leaves kind of come up forth and they get taller. And then from the center, the core, then this beautiful, long, very tall stem rises, and then the flowers are born on those. And those flowers really look like, they call it fairy wand, and it does look like wands. But I think about black cohosh being used for people who have had trauma in their lives, and who kind of maybe even themselves kind of walk kind of bent over, feeling their self-worth has been undermined, and they have a hard time shining in their own light. And over time, using black cohosh as a flower essence, if you watch that same gesture of the plant, where it starts off tight and then unfurls and stands tall in its own light, that is what people begin to experience in themselves in using black cohosh as a flower essence over time. They come into their own strength, their own being able to stand tall, and their own exuberant light within. I'd say in preparing those essences, keeping that in mind, you can see those same gestures in a person as you see in the plant themselves. Let me see if I can think of another one. Actually, I have a list here. See if I can read it. Okay, quaking aspen. Quaking aspen was one of the first essences that Dr. Edward Bach created many years ago. And it's the first tree to flower in the spring in the Northeast. And quaking aspen, in the leaves themselves, they quake, they shake, quaking aspen. They actually, and as the breeze comes through, they just kind of rattle, rattle, rattle. And for people who have a lot of anxiety, apprehension, especially due to the unknown, these are people who are nervous about what might be, and that anxiousness comes from not knowing what's next. And if there was ever a time in my lifetime where who knows what's happening next, it's right now in 2020. So it's a flower essence that many people have been ordering from us, recognizing that they don't know what's coming forward. They're nervous, they're anxious, they're worried about what's around the next corner. And of course, in life, we never really know what's around the next corner, but having the sense that we have some protection or some support around that is really helpful. So quaking aspen helps us feel like we can move forward with our personal strength and find that we can place our worry next to us. We can meet the unknown with a kind of new courage and strength. And I've used this over and over again in my practice, And I found it be incredibly helpful, even if people have been carrying anxiety for many, many years. It brings us back to center. It gives us mother courage. It helps us when we're starting something new or when there's something unknown. So that quaking action that happens in those leaves kind of shows us that that can be something that we can use for ourselves if we're feeling that way. So, and I also want to say that quaking essence was the first flower essence of a tree that we ever made way back in whenever that was, in the 80s. And it was very exciting. There was still snow on the ground. I had a small group of apprentices at that time. We went out and gathered some of it's more like catkins that the quaking aspen has. We gathered the catkins, we placed it on a bowl of water, and the water turned purple. I couldn't believe it until we looked with our little magnifiers and saw that the pollen was purple. So the water changed that color, and I thought, oh my gosh, this flower essence journey is going to be really wild. When we came back 3 hours later, the color was absolutely gone. But there was, the essence itself was kind of enhanced. It almost looked like little bubbles had developed on the bottom of the bowl. And we were just in amazement. I mean, it's really, this journey is going to take you places that you could never even imagine you're going to be going. So what I'd like to do just for a moment here, I know we've been talking about form and gesture, but in this story, it brings me wanting to say to you, how do you trust what you believe you are hearing? How do you trust what you believe you are seeing? How do you trust what you believe you are hearing or imagining? And I think imagination sometimes gets a bad rap. It's more like, oh, it's just in your imagination. Where I think imagination is absolutely the vehicle that helps us in the tuning in and in the receiving. So absolutely, if it's coming through your imagination, go for it. Your intuition, we're intuiting. We're sensing on that other level. So it takes practice. It really takes practice. And if you're using a pendulum, that takes practice as well. If you're using your body as a pendulum, that takes practice as well. So it's in the practice. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, I haven't used a pendulum because I don't know how yet. It's like, well, once you learn the basics, you just keep doing it until you feel more comfortable with it. And I'm going to be honest, it took me a good 7 years to feel really like I felt like, oh, I know this to be true. Before it was like, am I imagining this? There you go. Am I faking this? Am I pretending this? Am I like cuckoo crazy? You know, just all these different things, because it kind of, those ideas come into these Western minds because we don't have, from being young children, we are not supported in that realm of imagination, belief, understanding there's something more that we can't see. And the journey that you're taking with Pam, with this learning about, connecting with, understanding, and bringing into your life all of this that can't be seen, but you know to be true, is a real blessing. And so as you step more and more on that path, as you practice more and more, as you do your singular experiences, your group experiences, you bring your family into it, your neighbors into it, eventually the students that you're going to bring into it, it becomes more and more real. So it takes time, but you're going to know when it feels right. I want you to trust whatever you think you feel, whatever you think you hear, whatever you think you're seeing. The reality is that some of you may be clairaudient, you may be clairvoyant, you may have sensations that come through your heart, you may have these gifts, you may absolutely get these real messages in your mind. Trust whatever comes through. Write it down. I made the mistake of always thinking I was going to remember everything that happened. Not so good. So write things down after you have an experience, because when you do that, it becomes solid. You can go back to it. You can refer to it. And the other thing is, if you're making an essence, you can go back. You can take the essence that you've made, and it places you back to the point where you had the experience for real in real time, and you can go back to that and you can grow that experience. It's almost like you're watering that experience just by showing up again. But it is real. it is true. There are plant spirits. There is a grace. There is an essence. There's a vitality. There's a beauty. There is diversity. The diversity of what you need in your lifetime as you go through, the diversity of what your children, your partners, your family, your community, the world is going through. I really believe that there is a plant or a flower for anything and everything that we might come across. And sometimes I'd love to just pour these flower essences into the water supply everywhere. And in a way, the trees do that in the springtime as they're sprinkling their flowers. My husband was the first one to help me recognize that in the spring, the world gets a flower essence in the waterways. You know, the maple flowers, the oak flowers, the aspen flowers, anything that lives in your water just drops those flowers in, and it just flows to basically all peoples. So the idea is to be also then to catch those essences at different times of year when we need them more. So when you think about springtime, and it's just like, woohoo, the vibrancy of spring, you know, part of that is the flowers that's happening. So yeah, enjoy those. Let me see. I'm going to take a break right now and just say, Pam, I've just kind of let my mind and my thoughts go. Is there something else that I should close this with, or did I miss a piece, or
Oh my
what do you
goodness,
think?
Kate. I just want to say that I love you. You're just so awesome. And I love just listening to you. I mean, how many times have we, talked about this topic either together or in groups or in conferences or whatever. And I have to say, here I am, how many years later? 32 years later since I've met you. And I'm just so inspired by listening to you talk. I
Oh,
mean, I just have to say, this has been so wonderful and so great. And so many things, we're in alignment with, but then you've got your own little way and I've got my own little way. And it just all builds. It all builds on each other, and it just makes the whole subject richer and deeper and more wonderful. So I just can't tell you how grateful I am. And I'm sure all these lovely folks who are on this course are going to be so like, oh, thank goodness I got to hear her talk.
yeah.
So how can folks be in touch with you if they would like? How can they, please tell them how they could order herbs from you or whatever. Where do they find you,
Okay.
darling?
Okay, great. Thank you. So I do want to say one last thing. Just trust yourselves. Just trust the experience. That's it. Just trust. The rest will happen. And for getting in touch with us, our company, I should say, is woodlandessence.com. And we have flower essences and herbs for sure. You can reach me personally through Woodland Essence at the website there. There's a place where you can send a message. That would be great. At some point, I actually will have a CD on our website, which is very exciting. I've made it. I just don't have it on our website yet. Thanks, Pam, for saying that. I think those are the best ways to be in touch. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you all for listening, and I'm really happy to have been here with you. So, Pam, thanks a lot for the opportunity. It's really been kind of fun to remember. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being willing to share yourself with these folks, because I'm sure they're just so grateful. So, okay, everybody, thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Take care.